Here is the latest that we heard from the EU Parliament's president.
This is a difficult week. It has been a very difficult few days. We will not stop and leave no stone unturned. I cannot predict where this will go, but what I can say, I fear, and this is in a general point of view, after our initial findings, is that the story will not stop here.
Well, for more, we can cross over to France 24's Europe editor, Armen, Georgian, who's in Strasbourg for us. Armen, Parliament just voted to strip Eva Kaili of her functions. What does that mean for her going forward?
Well, this was a resounding vote. 625 MEPs voting to strip Eva Kaili of her role as Vice President of the European Parliament. Until now, she's been one of several vice presidents, so she's not the only one, but it's still a highly symbolic move. There was only one vote against and 2 abstentions, so clearly MEPs here sending a strong signal that they absolutely don't condone what happened, that they want to move forward, try to draw a line under this scandal, but also put in place some safeguards, and we can talk about that in a minute, Alison. In terms of what it means for Eva Kaili, well, of course, she has said through her lawyer earlier today that she is innocent, and this vote today, we should explain, does not end her mandate as an MEP. This plenary session in Strasbourg doesn't have the power to end Eva Kaili's mandate, but it does essentially stop her day-to-day activities in the European Parliament in any meaningful way. So that's really what this vote does.
And Armen, you were telling us that there's been lots of emotion and anger over this scandal, but have there been any concrete measures put on the table to avoid something like this happening again?
Yeah, I mean, just on the emotional side of things, very, very briefly, it's true that Roberta Metsola, the head of the European Parliament, she was watching her just after this vote. She was definitely a little bit more relaxed than she had been yesterday when clearly things were very tense. She gave that very fiery speech on Monday. Now I think with this vote under her belt, so to speak, she can perhaps ease into the next stage. But of course, the stakes are still very high because the question is, can the European Parliament regulate itself to stop this kind of thing happening again, or does it need an outside regulator? And that is a point where it's going to be difficult to find a unanimous decision, or even a strong consensus among more than 600 MEPs. But I was listening to a briefing earlier of one of the party group leaders who has presented, who's an ally of President Macron, actually. He presented a plan of several points. He did talk about creating a high authority for transparency, but again, it remains to be seen exactly what powers that will have. And as I said, that's going to be perhaps the most tricky part of all of this going forward. But he also mentioned widening the register of transparency, so essentially extending the kinds of meetings that would have to be reported and logged into the transparency register, and also taking more measures to increase transparency across all the EU institutions. So not just here at the European Parliament, but also at the European Commission and the European Council. I think on those two latter points, there could be some room for building consensus going forward. But on the bigger question of who ultimately has the power to regulate and discipline EU officials, that is going to be, I suspect, a slightly more tricky area.
All right, Armen, well, you will be closely following for us whatever does come out of that EU Parliament meeting. That's France 24's Europe editor, Armen Georgian.